Hello and welcome to chat number 15 of What Does Nature Mean to You? So had a tremendous plethora of amazing guests so far. I'm feeling very just fortunate and lucky to speak to all these amazing people. Tonight is no exception. I should have soon joining me Colin, who is the Digital Detox Coach. I met Colin probably over a year ago now. We went and met up in Hanningfield, which is a lovely nature reserve in kind of the middle of Essex. And he was telling me more about his experience, or his previous experience, his work in technology. And now he's kind of made the move to essentially take us away from technology. And he joined me on one of my forest bathing courses. I don't feel like I'm getting my words out well today. I'm tired. It's Sunday night. So forgive me, it won't be me talking. Hopefully it'll be the Digital Detox Coach joining me shortly. This week we've had some fantastic guests, and next week some more fantastic people. I've got someone lined up every single night next week, so really excited about that. So I will tell you who I'll be speaking to at the end of today's talk. But let me get Colin in. He's just joining me now. And yeah, stick around and I'll tell you who we'll be speaking to at the end. So I'm just waiting for the Digital Detox Coach, who should appear here.
Hello, Ruth.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well. I always get nervous to see whether or not the technology is going to work.
Yes, I've had a couple of hitches so far, but we're all good.
Yes.
I was trying to remember how long ago it was that we met. It was over a year ago now, maybe.
It was. I had to look it up. It was July last year.
Ah, that's it. We went up to Hanningfield, didn't we, and had a nice coffee and cake, I think.
Oh, sorry, no, we did the forest bathing in July. We actually met probably February, March, something like that.
There we go. Yeah, I was just explaining to everyone that we met, and then you came and joined me on one of my forest bathing sessions. But I was also trying to stumble over how to introduce you and sort of say about your previous work compared to now. But I think you'll do a better job than me. So could you let people know who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I'm Colin Corby, and I'm the Digital Detox Coach. So I've got a background in technology, spent most of my career in technology, but also I'm a swimmer and an Ironman triathlete. But my fascination, and it's partly from sport, is in behavioral and perceptual psychology. So in sport, I practiced on myself, but actually I was really interested on how the mind works. And so looking at technology and where the technology collides with how we think and behave as individuals seemed like a great place to investigate some more. So I'm a technology well-being coach, and my aim really is to help people get a better balance between the life on technology, and we all have to use technology, and it's great, but it's not great all the time for everything. And it's to get that better balance with the technology and everything else that we want to do and achieve in our lives.
Yeah, I guess that's it. It's inevitable that we kind of pretty much have to use it, especially this year, and yet getting that healthy relationship with it. And I imagine you have seen the documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma.
Oh, that was great, wasn't it? So,
yeah, I wondered what you thought.
Well, now anything you see on television, it's a story. So although it was a documentary, it was a story. And in order to get some of the key themes across, it was a great story in that respect, but it was particularly an American story. So whilst everything that came up is, relatively true, there's much more to it than that. But yes, so there is a slightly dark side, and you end up getting presidents that perhaps are quite unusual if you follow the dark side. But actually, it's all to do with the fact that we're very much more narcissistic if we're not in front of people. And also there's something called in psychology called confirmation bias. So we seek out things that we already believe. And then we surround ourselves with people that believe exactly the same as we do. And we can't understand why anyone else can't believe what we believe, because everybody we know believes what we know, because that's what we see on social media. So there's all of that amplification of differences. Whereas if you have more human contact, then actually we're not all the same. So some of our best friends might hold different views in lots of different areas than we do, have lots of different hobbies and things like that. And if we're mixing with people all the time, we appreciate that everyone is slightly different, and we tone down how we interface with people, react to people, because we can see the impact that it has. So it was a great story, a great film. It's a bit doomsday though, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. But that's interesting. Yeah, that I guess the use of technology and screens, again, especially this year, it sounds in some ways that reduces our human connection.
Yes.
And our, as you say, a perception of impact on our actions on another. And I wonder how that, so we're not going to our questions just yet of what does nature mean to you, but I wonder how then you have been pondering on that this year in particular, when so many of us have perhaps become quite reliant on this way of connecting with one another.
So because I do a lot of research, particularly on behavioral and perceptual psychology, what interests me is technology is, we think it's wonderful and it's absolutely marvelous, and that technology does some weird and wonderful things, but we get carried away with it. So technology is really quite simple. To give you an example, a smartphone I might have had 5 years ago compared to the one I've got now, it was rubbish compared to the one I've got now. And I know that my smartphone that I'm talking to you on will be complete rubbish in 5 years' time. So, and you know, it doesn't matter what you choose. You can choose anything. The thing about technology is that it's specifically designed for humans, and it creates what I call an illusion. It's just good enough. So I'll give you a very quick example. So I'm looking at a screen. Now, I happen to know that screens are made up of pixels, and televisions are and everything. But I also happen to know that I've only got 3 color receptors in my eye. So my screen, because it's just good enough, will only produce pixels with those 3 colors in. So if you, for example, if you go outside into nature, there's everything. But if you look at a screen, you've got it, if you go deep enough, you'll end up with those 3 color pixels. And that's why our dogs can't enjoy the same programs as we can, because they've got 2 color receptors, but they can see better in the dark, so they don't see the same things as we do. So our screens are optimized for us. So it's a sort of illusion, but it's good enough to create the illusion. So it's really just quite superficial. All of our technology, if you go far enough down, is quite superficial. But it's great.
Well, that's it. I mean, I've never been someone that completely shuns it in any way. Gosh, definitely not. I'm here on Instagram. And at the same time, I've always known I need to sort of get that balance. And I feel definitely this year that balance has tipped, even though I'm someone that goes out to nature, is fortunate to live near some great green spaces, and a partner that, you know, that's mainly what we'll do in our spare time, whether this year had happened or not. But at the same time become so reliant on it for perhaps connecting to people, to friends, to family now. It just feels like it's really shifted my relationship with it. And equally, some of the work that I do when I'm not doing the forest work has become completely internet based, and talking to people overseas. And that's, again, incredible and a mind-blowing thing to be able to do, and to sit
in my bedroom in my pajamas and make a living. But it feels like it's drawn me even further and further away from nature and the outside world and the real connections with people, even though that's the other thing that I very much promote and know is really good for me. So it feels, I don't know, it feels a really mixed feeling, me personally, on a sort of an emotional basis, as to my relationship with technology now.
Yes, I mean, throughout the ages, we created technology. So let's say we're at the time in history where clockwork was all the rage. So what we do as humans, we think, wow, that's really clever. We must imagine that we think a bit like a clockwork robot. So we start to think in those terms. Or if you have steam engines, you start to think, well, it's much more mechanical, or early, valves and transistors. So our digital technology now is just the latest craze. So all of a sudden we think, oh, we've created these wonderful calculating machines that can produce pictures and do various other things. And so we must be something like that. But of course we're not. We've got, so we live in an analog world, and nature is analog. And what that means is that nature contains all the information, whereas digital actually cuts it up into enough information to be able to do a particular task. But we're not digital. So we're analog as well. But it's more than that. You've had lots of people coming on to your talks saying that actually we're part of nature. We're not separate from nature. We're part of nature, and it's absolutely true. But if you go slightly deeper, we don't have a brain that's separated from our body. It's actually all one biological component. So the body and the senses influence the brain influences the body, our external environment. So it's all this analog interplay. So I think with technology, we just have to think, yes, it's wonderful. We can't live without it. We use it every day. We couldn't live without it. But hey, we don't have to use it for everything. We need to get a much better balance.
We'll have to ask you a bit more about how we do that then when we sort of get to the end of this. But I guess as we're talking about nature and nature being analog and being everything out there,
yes,
and I guess then how we are relating to that when we're out there, obviously that's healthier for us. So obviously, is there any sort of added detail you can put to that as to why? I might explain it one way in my forest bathing sessions, but how would you explain why that's good for us?
So when we go outside into nature, and I've said that everything is there, all the information is there. So like all other animals, we've evolved primarily for our own survival. So the skills that we have in what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell, and all those sorts of things, and our social skills and all these other things has evolved to enable us to survive. Now, lots of different animals and insects and just about everything else, they've done exactly the same thing, but they've come up with a slightly different answer. So nature contains everything. So it doesn't matter what animal you are, you can actually interface with enough of it for your own survival, but you're only looking at a fraction of it. So a great example is I love to go into nature and listen to birdsong. Isn't it wonderful? It really is. And if that's the only thing, and you've got a bit of wind through the trees and you've got the birdsong, it's really, really enjoyable. It makes you happy, it makes you feel good, and all the rest of it. But I know that the other birds listening to that bird song are actually getting so much more out of it. And the reason, quite simply, is that their brains for birdsong and hearing birdsong operate so much faster than ours. So if we can hear, a top level melody, they can hear a whole orchestra, and they can actually establish emotions, communication, and all those other things, because they can hear in that sort of level of precision And in that, and their brains in that respect, they operate so much faster than us. Now we don't need to, because it's not absolutely essential for our, evolution. So when I listen to birdsong, I think, isn't that wonderful? But it must be so much more wonderful to the birds listening to it. So that's just a lovely example. There's a lovely BBC snippet that actually slowed down birdsong so you could hear all the different parts. And I think they can hear something like, 64 times more information than we can.
Wow.
But
I want to be a bird now.
but bees, aren't bees great? I mean, because, why do bees go for green flowers? I mean, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Well, because bees can see more or less the same definition as we can, but they've got a couple of colours and ultraviolet. So when they go to a plant, it's waving to them in ultraviolet light, saying, come over and see me. And because we enjoy the flowers and we're enjoying the bees, but they're actually seeing something different to us, and it's amazing.
I love this. But
I mean, there are insects. Is it? There are some animals that see in infrared. So if you're a little mouse and you think you're okay because you're hiding, too late. Your body heat can be seen by your predator. Because they've evolved to be able to see infrared. So, it's the whole spectrum. And, we hear a certain range. Dogs hear, was it higher range because we have those dog whistles. And so every animal's different. So we just have to appreciate that. And we forget, because everything we do is human-centric. So we imagine the world from our own perspective. But it's our own box. But the lucky thing for humans is our prefrontal cortex is the most developed of any animal. And that's where we do our conscious thinking. So we've got this ability to actually say, yeah, I know all that's going on there, but let's think about this weird stuff. What does it really mean? And that's our ability. That's why we make tools and we have social interactions and all those other things. So we can start to think, well, yeah, that's our box that we're in. What does it feel like to be a bat? Or what does it feel like to be a bee? Or or how do owls fly silently at night? Or all of those sorts of really big questions. So that's our gift and curiosity, is to be able to just try and go beyond ourselves and imagine these other things. But it takes a lot of effort to do that. So most of the time we just swipe through our phones like everyone else.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what is your earliest memory of connecting to nature? Because obviously, as you said, you've got your technology and background and experience and knowledge. You're passionate about doing research and learning, and obviously knowing a lot about nature and how we interact with nature. But what's your earliest memory of nature in some way?
So so the question that you asked, what's my earliest feelings and memories of nature, and it turns out to be a really hard one. And the reason is, I still live in the town that I was born, and I live in Walden, which is an old Essex town. It's on a hill, and it overlooks, and it's the last crossing point in two rivers. And so you've got options of the river estuary, parks, or countryside, and it's all very close. My parents' house was opposite the park. So my entire childhood was spent by the water in a saltwater lake, swimming from the age of 4, as far as I can't remember that, but I'm told that was the case. It's not there now because of health and safety, but that's what we used to do. We used to play in the salt marshes, because Malden's famous for salt, so there's lots of salt marshes. Or we were cycling in the countryside, and there's a great place called Beeley. There's an abbey there, but actually there's a weir there, so where both rivers come together, and they go over some weir gates, some lock gates, and various other things. There's water everywhere, absolutely wonderful. So it's probably easier saying, when did I first realize that I wasn't in nature as an opposite? Because it was just normal. It was, you know, it was normal. We, you know, I don't know if you know much about people in Malden. They don't travel. So, the old Maldonians didn't travel much. There was a octocentenary, 800 years celebration of something. And I overheard a couple of old Maldonians saying, no, they're not going to go to the celebration this time. They'll catch it next time round. So I can do that joke because I'm a Maldonian. So yeah, so it was only when I started working in London in telecoms, and I think I was about 21, I started commuting, that I was just so glad to get, you know, in the weekends to be back at home. It was like a sanctuary. So I noticed when it wasn't there, as
That's a
opposed
great
to when
answer.
it was there. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's definitely something that's been coming up again in all these chats of whether people were fortunate enough to grow up surrounded by nature or not, and that's a real difference, I think, for people and their connection or their journey with it. So with all of that in mind and having grown up with it, and then of course your understanding of it and our brains and how that works, what does nature mean to you?
So so I reacquainted myself with nature when I was in my mid-30s, and one of the reasons, well, it was actually with exercise first, because working in London was terribly exciting, but quite stressful. And so I suffered a little bit of stress, although in those days people didn't talk about too much stress. And I think I was a bit prone to passing out for some reason under certain conditions, which was a bit odd. So they did all the tests, and I don't think the tests were that great, so they didn't find anything. So I thought, well, I'd better get myself fit again. And they just opened one of these newfangled freshwater swimming pools in Malden, and my children were swimming. So I remember being a super swimmer. So I went into this swimming pool and I was atrocious. 2 lengths, and I was really atrocious. And I thought, well, I've got 2 options. I could accept that I'm actually this terrible swimmer, or I could book some lessons, learn how to swim properly, and you know, recover that memory. So a year and a half later, I started competing in swimming. So I recovered that, and then I joined a triathlon group. So where I'm going to on this is, it was the triathlon club, where you need to do these other things called running and cycling. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I don't mind doing that, but actually, you know, I'm okay at swimming. So so I started running again, and of course, the great thing about running is you've got to run somewhere. And so I started running into the countryside and around Malden, and cycling in the countryside. So I reacquainted myself with the countryside through sport. And then I got persuaded. To be fair, I'm gullible. I have to be honest about this. And somebody, after sharing a bottle of wine, said, would you like to do an Ironman triathlon? I thought, well, that's easy, because the swimming's easy. There's just those other 2 things. So I said yes, and then I had to train for it. So then, in going through that exercise of how on earth do you, well, I know how to swim 2.4 miles and how to swim 10 kilometers if necessary, but then cycling 112 miles and then doing a marathon, that seems quite difficult. So that's when I got into this. Well, how do you almost self-hypnosis, control your mind to be able to do those sorts of things? So I did an Ironman, and it took me 15 hours and something. You have to do them within 17 hours. So I wasn't a fast Ironman triathlete. I was, you know, one that got to the end. And then I did another one. I think I was a bit depressed, so I did another one. And then I thought, well, I better do another one, because 2 doesn't sound enough. But then I did NLP training. So I did NLP training to understand the mind. I wasn't quite happy with that. So then I did my own research, which is much more more scientific. But it's through the research and through this technology that sort of nature kept jumping up as the alternative. The thing about getting a better balance, and that's for all of us, myself included, is that you've got to have an alternative. So it's no good saying to somebody, you know, don't spend so much time on your phone, or don't just scroll on Facebook or whatever. You've got to say, well, actually, what would you really like to do? Would you? So nature really is the easiest thing for most of us, whether that's a park or a garden or countryside. It's one of the easiest things we do because we can walk in nature. And certainly as you get older, doing the walking part of exercise is absolutely crucial. And, you know, Chief Medical Officer has produced guidelines on how much exercise. But one of the reasons why we should do that is it flushes out the toxins from the brain because the blood flows around and all those other great things. So walking in nature is really important. But then I started to think, well, okay, what is it about nature? And so then things like, weird things like, you can hear a room that makes no sound. Now, you know, we all know we can do this because when we watch a TV show or a film, they do all the shots in these big studios, but then they have to change all of the sound so that it sounds like a bedroom, a kitchen, an urban street, even though they're not there, because we may not know what's wrong, but if we're watching something that's in a bedroom, but it sounds like the bathroom, and it's all echoey, or the other way around, then we'll say, well, we don't really, you know, something's wrong there, or we don't get engaged. So we can hear spaces. And even if there's no sound, we can pick up the sound of our own footprint, the footsteps, and our own breathing, and the way that it comes back between the different ears. So not only can we see things, but we hear things, we smell things, and we taste things, and all of that input, the brain doesn't care. It just takes it all and makes an image. So when you go into nature, and it's wonderful. If you go into a wood and you just stop and just pay attention, not to anything particular, just say, what am I feeling? Then it's very much like one of your forest bathing sessions. You feel the wind on your cheeks, but there's a funny smell as well. The smell might be, if it's been raining, it might be some rotting vegetation. You've got lots of sounds and all of that, and it's so rich. But of course, if you're in an urban environment, yes, you've got lots of things going on, and you've got buildings and all the rest of it, but it's stimulating the mind. In fact, it's overstimulating the mind. Whereas when we're in nature, because of our evolution, it doesn't demand our attention. We can give it as much or as little as we want. And that's one of the reasons why it reduces stress in ourselves compared to an urban environment, which is bombarding us all the time with road signs, traffic noise, you know, hyperlinks on our computer, notifications. That's overloading our systems. Whereas in nature, it's, you know, okay, yes, I'm going to look at this tree, or I'm going to look at this thing. And then you just sort of, you can take your time. And there's lots of science, but one of the best bits of science is that it helps us restore our concentration. So let's say we're working, and lots of us are working at home. We've been working for 20, 40 minutes. We're finding ourselves, oh, this is, you know, dragging a bit. I think I'll just check my phone. Instead of doing that, you can get up, go out into a garden or by your window box, just look at the nature, and actually you'll get more restoration in terms of your concentration than you would by checking your phone.
Yeah,
So
it's just resetting that brain, isn't it?
it is.
I'm just enjoying the sound in the background at the same time here.
I have a few clocks in my house. One of my jobs years ago was to buy an atomic clock for British Telecom International, and so we went to Switzerland because you buy all the best clocks from Switzerland, and so it was really a serious physics. And so after that, I thought, well, we don't really want that precision. I'll go back to clockwork. So I have some clocks.
Fantastic, a collection. Oh, that was quite nice. It's quite calming. Okay, so yeah, there's so much information. It's brilliant. I could just sit and listen. And every so often I'm trying to sort of almost make notes to remember what to ask next, because there's just so much information. I remember when we met before, you were just an absolute wealth of information and research. And so I'm so looking forward to speaking to you, because of knowing that there'll be so much of that. I wonder then, when we talked a little bit about this year, and that was more me saying my relationship with technology has changed. When I've been asking people what does nature mean to them, I've also been asking, has that connection or relationship with nature changed this year at all? And I wonder for you, I mean, you're, you know, as you said, in Malden, surrounded by nature. Have you noticed any difference, or have your, I guess, your opinions or relationship with nature changed in any way this year?
I think
or what you've observed with others?
Yeah, I think they have. One thing that's still with me is when we had the first lockdown, how quiet it was. And in my back garden, I thought my back garden was quiet. Malden's not a huge town. I mean, it's much bigger now than it was. But there was no road noise. There wasn't the drone of road noise. There wasn't huge amounts of human activity noise that there is. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like someone switched the volume up. And so, I mean, I always hear birds in the garden. I've got some trees in the garden, but there was just so many more. And there was just so much more sound. And even in, you know, the partial lockdown that we have now, and there's not as much traffic as there was before, but there is that drone. So I miss that that silence in a town. I know we can't have it in a town. We have to really go in the countryside to get it. But that stays with me. I do remember that silence. We had a hurricane many years ago, and in the middle of the night, I felt something. I was trying to sleep, but it just didn't feel right. And what it was is the pressure, air pressure in the house was low because of so much wind outside. And I went outside my house, and there was tumbleweeds, what seemed like tumbleweeds blowing up the road. And although there was a hurricane and wind, there was no man-made noise. And so it's the only other time I can remember in Malden where it's just been the elements. So I'm so pleased to experience no noise. And now I can look forward to, you know, when we all have electric cars, there'll still be some road noise, but it'll be a bit quieter. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like everyone else, all my plans went out the window. So I had to decide to do something else or to just restructure. So I'm on a 6-month training course, consciously digital training course, coaching course. And so that's really sharpening up my coaching skills within technology and well-being. So I'm managing to occupy myself on that. But it's interesting that in a sense, technology has saved us in many ways, because it's bought us, most of us, enough time for them to work out how to create vaccines and all the rest of it. And it does take a very long time to do those sorts of things. So it's but it's kept us all going. It's kept most of us fed, and we still have lights and power and one or two other things. So it's been absolutely essential. But what it's also done is it's sped up certain things, changes that were going to happen anyway. So the demise of the high street was happening, it's just been sped up. The growth of global internet companies has just gone ballistic, and at the cost of much smaller companies. The good thing is we can all work from home more now. I mean, I worked from home 20 odd years ago. So the technology was always there, but the inclination wasn't there. So now everyone's now saying, well, we could all work at home more. But then that has knock-on effects in terms of, you know, commercial property prices. Businesses in towns, all of a sudden, there's no one there to do them. So technology has, the inroads on technology have accelerated much, much more during this current crisis, and it won't reset. So everything is now different.
Yeah, and I guess with that, just thinking as you were saying that, also, and obviously it's a whole nother subject we can get into, but also that then disparity between people who can work from home, who can live surrounded by nature, can have that access and have, I guess, those privileges or those types of jobs that can do that, and then the real extreme of people that can't do that because their jobs can't be from home, or they don't have, and not just that, perhaps then also don't have the access, or don't have the privilege, or don't have the equipment, or, you know, there's so many things that come with that as this technology speeds up and makes a lot of our lives better and easier in many ways. It also strikes me that then that extreme between privilege and not becomes even bigger. And I think that also connects with access to nature as well. And a little bit what I was talking about, I guess, last week with Ellen from Nature as a Human Right. And this conversation always comes back to me of, you know, those of us, again, that have that access to green spaces and nature, or can make that choice to move, as we hear more and more people are moving out, not just commercial properties, perhaps even domestic, moving from the city to more perhaps rural or at least suburban life. And the people that can't or don't have that luxury, and then can't get to green space and outdoor space as well. So it strikes me as it's a wonderful, exciting path that we're on, despite the horrendous challenge and situation that is the year of 2020, and hopefully that will pass. But equally, the new challenges that brings up too for people, and for nature itself as well. But that's a whole nother big subject, and me kind of, you know, rambling my brain out.
The important thing is even a very small piece of nature. Let's say you have some plants in your lounge. That actually gives benefits. In fact, there was a study that showed that just looking at a picture of a scene, natural scene, obviously it's not as good as being in nature, but it actually has some beneficial effects. So I think that the task really is enabling everyone to understand more about how our biological brains and bodies work, so that we don't just go down the road of spending all of our time on our technology, because we're not exercising enough, we're perhaps not eating, spending enough time with the right food, and we're certainly not necessarily getting into nature. So there's a whole, so it's that balance. Technology is great, but it's, you know, it's not everything. It's getting that balance. So what we should do, and what I'm trying to do, is just to allow people to say, you know what, I love my smartphone, but I don't need to take it everywhere with me. I don't need to take it in my, you know, my bedroom. I can just leave it in another room charging, and I can go out without it if that's what I want to do, or I could switch it on to aircraft mode or something like that. I don't need to respond to that WhatsApp message straight away. You know, it's just a tool. I mean, I don't carry my screwdrivers and hammers around with me all the time, because actually I don't want to mend something all the time. So although I can do loads of things on my smartphone, it doesn't mean to say I have to do them. So it's all about the balance. And there's a tricky bit, because there's something called persuasive design. And persuasive design, and basically it uses all of our psychological biases and heuristics, and it tries to get us to think automatically out of habits. So it's a bit like carrying Derren Brown with you, who I'm a great admirer of, in your pocket. You get out Derren Brown, and you know you're going to forget everything that you just thought of, and you're going to say whatever he's going to suggest to you, because it's Derren Brown. Why wouldn't you? So there's a lot of that technique being used, but the good news is, of course, that all of those techniques are designed for us not to think. But of course, the great thing is we can choose to think, and as soon as we think, the spell's broken.
Those conscious decisions to
Yes.
put it down, or choose how you interact with it. And certainly I'm a big believer in things like I turn off my notifications for pretty much everything other than perhaps WhatsApp or text. But I don't get notifications for Instagram or Facebook or my email. I choose to go in, and for me that's made a big difference. Doesn't mean I'm still not on it more than I probably should be, but
you can choose to say, look, I've got a half an hour and I really don't want to do anything. I just want to go on Facebook and I'm going to swipe, and I'm going to be perfectly happy doing it. And that's okay, as long as you only do it for the time that you want to. So if you've said, I want to do that for half an hour, just do it for half an hour. But in an hour and a half's time, you think, where's the time gone? So you have to be, so even if you do something that, it just doesn't matter too much, you do still consciously time bound it as well. So it really doesn't matter what you do on your phone, to be honest. It's that you decide to do it for a particular time.
Which strikes me, as you were saying, that is having, I guess, ultimately it's self-discipline, without beating ourselves up, without, because again, we are part of, this is already influencing us, it's not our fault, but having some sort of self-discipline, which often it's not that easy for us humans, and is sometimes something that we get taught or we learn as well, and perhaps particularly as children and teenagers. And of course now we're in an age where children and teenagers are so much on technology, and that's again a fantastic thing as well as potentially a problem. And all these chats have come up about connecting to nature, and the key thing seemed to be if people grew up in nature and then continued that connection with nature, especially through the teenage years, where depending on school demands and time, or even your peers and what's cool or what's not, can really make that difference as to how people connect and protect nature. And of course then technology is coming in to really distract from that. And
so I think there's it's quite difficult to imagine what it's like to be young and have exposure to that. And it's quite easy to imagine that all of these techniques are going to work. But if we take a look at Derren Brown, for example, the audience is self-selected. The people that go up on stage are self-selecting. So it's basically improving the chances of something working all along. So a lot of the effects of this programming, it does work and it does make a difference, but it won't make a difference to everybody. So I'm kind of thinking that boredom's going to come in at some stage, where, so if you've grown up with all of these things and you've done everything there is to be done on it, a certain element of boredom is going to come into it. So I don't think younger generations are lost at all, in the same way that we weren't lost to television, or the previous generation wasn't lost to radio. There are, I mean, online gambling is an addiction. And there are a couple of others that are problematic. But generally speaking, there may be an element of boredom that we really, because it's still quite new, that we haven't really seen yet. But the thing about our use of smartphones and technology is, what we've got to do is have something else better to do.
Yes, which goes back to what you're saying, that alternate behavior, alternate option, which struck something in my head. In one of the many things I've done in my life, I worked with dogs in particular, but animal behavior. And on a very sort of, I suppose, basic level, if you had an undesired behavior in your dog, rather than, I mean, the old school would be punishment and telling it off. The new, nicer, kinder way of behavior change is positive reinforcement. So you have an undesired behavior, and actually the best way to manage that is to offer an alternative behavior, the alternative desired behavior, and when the dog chooses that, then rewarding for that. So you're ultimately giving the dog that choice, but the dog is learning that if they do the desired behavior, that has a benefit, and they may keep doing that because they'll be rewarded. And again, humans, we're animals. It's sounding like it's not good enough to say, don't stay on your phone all day, or don't stay on technology all day. You need that alternate behavior, and the reward or the benefit of that. I wonder, do we need to quantify that? Do people now need to know that? Or, because they're instinctively feeling it, is that enough in these times when we quantify everything?
So I think there's lots of parallels. So if we take smoking, there's lots of studies that suggest that you don't become addicted to smoking in the first few years, which is quite interesting. There are lots of people that can give up smoking, and I mean, this is nicotine's an addictive drug. There are some people that find it very difficult, but there are programs that can help people with smoking. So with our technology, there's no substances coming into the body. So what we're dealing with is a behavior and habits. So the great thing about habits is they go from being a conscious thing to an unconscious thing. And once they're an unconscious thing, they just sort themselves out, and we do them all the time, whether that's, brushing our teeth or going, in my case, going for a run on a Saturday morning. I have no thinking about it whatsoever, and I've been doing it for 15 years, and that's the best way. You can create new habits. You just have to decide what the habit is, anchor it onto something else, and then be prepared to do it every day for at least 45 days. And then all of a sudden, it will drop from your consciousness to your unconscious. So you can train new habits, but then you come to the question of, well, there needs to be something better to do. And that's going to be a difficult one, like smoking. Well, and I come back to the smoking. People give up smoking. Giving up is not a positive thing. And there's something called loss aversion. So we hate losing things. So giving up something is always a bad way of tackling something. So the positive alternatives of being in nature, exercise, eating, etc., have got to be something that people want to do. Now, exercise, you can get more people interested in exercise because of sport, whether that's team sport or individual sport. So sport can be sorted out. Young people can be introduced to sport. They get camaraderie. They're part of a team, or they get all of the confidence associated with sport. So really, being in nature it's got to be cool to be in nature, to actually start turning that tide. So with the younger generation, we know that they're telling us off now about climate change, us oldies. So in general, they appear to be more in tune with climate change, which is a natural thing. So I think being more in nature is already part of a movement with young people. So I'm quite confident. It's very difficult for oldies to imagine the youngsters, but the youngsters don't really want to be using plastic now. They've watched David Attenborough, so they've taken it all in. They know we've really made a bad job of it. And we're not going fast enough because we'll be long gone and they'll have to pick up the pieces. So I think there's some optimism there.
Definitely. And I think, again, with that, I'm very conscious as an oldie, not speaking for a young person either, because we can't know. We don't know. We can try and remember, but it was different then. And also when we remember, we're probably not remembering accurately. But the fact, and thinking my conversation last week with the brilliant Indy Green, who is a young conservationist. If people haven't watched that, I definitely urge you skip back through my post and find my conversation with him. And when I asked him, you know, how can we get more young people engaged, or what do you think we need to do to get, or people engaged in general, not just young people? One of the first things he did say was about social media and how you're using it, and how you're and what language you're using, and some of the big conservation organizations perhaps in the past may have communicated on one level that maybe doesn't engage people by making it fun or cool or understandable. You don't have to have, you know, your science background or know what all the different birds are, for example. So there is this fantastic tool again that we have to engage more people with nature, and yeah, it's sort of, it can sometimes feel like you're in this like circle, but it's just again about that balance. And I did actually just see a comment come up from Indy's dad, in fact, that said, oh, such an interesting, thought-provoking conversation. As you say, a balanced mind, a balanced life, which I guess is what it all comes down to, really. So I guess that could lead me into the final question for you then, which some of it you've already answered, I think, already, but what would your advice be to people?
The first piece of advice is just remember that technology, albeit is great, you know, isn't everything. There isn't, you know, it's great, we enjoy it, but actually there's loads of other things. So really put it in its box. I think that's the most important thing. The other thing is that in our world today, the scarcest resource is our attention. And that is really a scarce resource. And there's a lot of competition for our attention. Because it's a scarce resource, and it's ours individually, we've all got our own attention, then we should be in control of it. And the reason is that our brains receive something like, I don't know, 10 million pieces of information from our senses every second. But we're only consciously aware of between 10 and 50 bits. Okay? So, and we can't pay attention to everything. So we should choose what we pay attention to. We can only remember what we pay attention to, and we can only experience what we pay attention to. So the key message is we've all got something incredibly valuable, and it's our attention. It's so valuable that there's global companies trying to grab it from us and to get more of it. And I think one CEO, I think it was Netflix, said even our sleep is their competitor in terms of attention and those. So we've got this valuable resource, and just say, hey, I've got this valuable resource, I'm going to use it for this. So it's taking ownership of our attention. I think that would be the piece of advice.
Oh, that's amazing. I've never thought of it in that way. Take ownership of our attention. Love that. I shall ponder on that some more. That's really empowering as well. And I think that's a key thing in this. You always want choice and to feel empowered. I like that. Thank you. A great place to end, but I did see a question a little bit earlier on, And we'll try and keep it fairly quick because I think we've talked for quite a long time, which is brilliant, and I'm sure we could carry on. But someone was asking a little bit earlier on what is your opinion on the various apps that are out there now to interact with nature. I mean, I can think of one that I used for a while over summer, an app called Seek, which is an amazing app that also connects with iNaturalist, where you can kind of scan what's out there and identify. It's fairly accurate. Every so often it comes up with something slightly strange, but most of the time really accurate, or at least a suggestion of what something might be. And that one in particular was designed as almost a bit of a challenge, so that you had to get a certain amount of kind of insects or certain type of bird or things like that to kind of get your different challenge and badges. And I really enjoyed it as a way of learning more and identifying. But I also noticed at some point, for me, it felt uncomfortable because I started to buy into the badges and challenges and wanting to collect. And I thought, this is the same psychology on some of the other apps of likes and things. And I suddenly wondered if it was changing how I was interacting with nature. And I sometimes make a choice to use it, and other times not. Now is a time when I'm not using it. So as you say, that choosing attention. But eventually I just deleted it because I think I was still not quite sure quite how to use it.
So the thing about apps, if an app comes from a trusted source, so I haven't used any nature apps, but if an app comes from a trusted source, so there's a great app from the NHS. It's called Couch to 5K. Everybody's heard, and it's wonderful. It uses gamification, which is what you were referring to, which is using the same persuasive design techniques to motivate, but its intentions are purely beneficial. So if an app comes from a trusted source and its intentions are purely beneficial, then it's a good app. I mean, I use the Meteorological Office for my weather, and so there's and I use BBC for my news. So there are trusted apps which we can use, but there's a real issue with doing everything online, and I'll try and be quick about this. Reading isn't a natural thing. There were always learned people, but not the masses. So when printed books came in, the masses started to be able to learn to read and write, and it changed our brains. And the way it changed our brains is it allowed us to concentrate. And as a result of being able to concentrate, lots of other things have happened, because some problems require a lot of concentration. If we do stuff online, it's not the same. There's something called when we read online, it's we scan, whether it's an F or a Z pattern, and we look at hyperlinks. A totally different experience, and we don't concentrate as much. So, for example, on a nature app which identifies lots of things that we wouldn't know the answer to, it's great to use it. But at the same time, I'd recommend having a printed book and to read the printed book, so that you actually do both things, so that you don't lose the ability to concentrate and to acquire knowledge and to learn knowledge. Because if the knowledge is there, I Google stuff. So if I want to know something, I Google it. I don't remember what the answer is, but I remember where to get it.
Yes. And well, that's definitely what I could feel with this app, in that there were some things that would be coming up regularly that perhaps I sort of half knew anyway, and that was just reaffirming it, and I learned somewhat. But when you're gathering more and more species and identifying more and more, that wasn't really embedding it in my brain. Whereas the act of having gone through the book and look and learn and read, concentrate,
it's concentration.
I had more chance of remembering what it was that I had seen. And I enjoy the feel of a book, and I enjoy the pictures, and I enjoy the learning, and I love a read of a book.
But you can do both.
You can do both.
Yes, do both. It's a balance, but it's only by concentrating, that you can commit things to longer term memory. By looking things up, it goes into very short-term memory, and that can be overloaded really, really quickly because you're looking at too many things, too much stimulation. But if you want to learn something, then you have to take more time. And if you want to engage your higher self, which is things like critical thinking, emotions, feelings, and all of those sorts of things, they take a little bit of time for the brain to create. So the brain does need time to actually get in touch with all of those things, and also to learn stuff.
Which goes back to that wonderful advice then of, our attention is our resource, and choosing what gets our attention and making that conscious choice, really.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Colin. I mean, I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about, and I'm sure lots more questions. But having just a quick check on the comments, I think that was it. Now we had lots of wonderful people joining, and yeah, lovely. All right, there we go. I think we've answered them, I think.
Oh, excellent. Anyway, I'm looking forward to joining you again.
Oh, yes.
When we can all get back together again.
Thank you. Very quickly before you go, Colin, how can people follow you and see what you're doing or get in touch?
So the easiest way is on Instagram, and it's the Digital Detox Coach. I tend to post once a week because posting more than that would be a bit sort of a bit counterproductive, really, wouldn't it? But what I try and do is mostly I try and take an interesting picture of nature normally, or my dog, and but then I try and explain an idea. So I have explained concentration and reading, for example. There's the paradox of choice. So within my, so many characters, I try and explain an idea, and then with a little bit of, suggestion for how you can take time off under a digital detox.
Oh, I always love your posts. I always feel like I'm learning, definitely, from your posts. So yes, encourage everyone to go and follow, and I'll make sure I obviously tag you as well. But thank you so much again, Colin. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ruth.
Thank you. Oh, my brain is churning around all that information and knowledge. It's absolutely fantastic. Before I go, because this is obviously carried on a little bit longer than normal, but let me just give you a heads up on what's coming up this week. So got some fantastic guests again this week coming. Really excited. Tomorrow night, Monday night, 8:30 p.m. UK time. We have Gavin, the story forager, who I can see has just joined to watch. Hi, Gavin. I'm really excited that Gavin will be joining us and sharing his thoughts on what nature means to him. And then Tuesday night, I'm speaking to local chef John Lawson, who has a great connection to the land and all of his ingredients, and we'll chat to him and find out more. Wednesday night, Mike Thomas Coach, who is an old friend and colleague from the theatre world that is now a coach, and very kindly invited me to do a live Insta with him a while ago. It was my first time doing a live Instagram, and I was very nervous, and now I'm doing it every night. Thursday night, the outdoor adventurer Isaac Kenyon, who is also I'm going to say a representative for Mind, the mental health charity, and a big lover of the outdoors. So great, we're looking forward to speaking to him. Friday night, Leanne Clayton, who works with young people out in nature. I'm really excited to speak to her. I'm excited to speak to everyone. And then Sunday, I have got Nature Connections India. So really excited to hear about forest bathing and nature connection work out in India. And then Sunday night, Make It Wild UK as well. So lots of lovely, exciting people again. So do join us or catch up by clicking on my posts or looking to the IGTV channel to catch up on all the posts.